Hello everybody and welcome to Love English. I'm Sabrah and today we're going to be looking at the second and third conditional. Okay, so the second and third conditional are grammar structures which we use to talk about imaginary situations. And they both have different functions, so we'll start by looking at the second conditional. So let's look at the use of the second conditional. So we use the second conditional to talk about situations which we imagine in the present or in the future. So where we imagine what we could do or we might do if something happened, okay? So usually these are quite unlikely situations, but sometimes there is a small possibility that the thing could happen. For example, this is a very popular example. If I won the lottery, I would buy a Ferrari. I'm sure lots of people would agree with that if they won the lottery, they would buy a Ferrari. So another example we can take from Beyonce's song, If I Were a Boy. Here she says, if I were a boy, she's imagining if she was a boy. Important to note there that in the first person, in I, we can actually use was or were. Even though was is actually the correct form, we've changed it in spoken English to become were. So here she says, if I were a boy, I would drink beer with the guys. So she's imagining if she was a boy, that's what she would do. Fair enough. But Beyonce is definitely not a boy and not likely to become one. So this is quite impossible. So if we compare this to if I won the lottery, I'd buy a Ferrari, there is a very small chance that you could win the lottery. All those people that are spending £1 or more on the lottery are believing that they have that chance. So definitely there is a chance, even if it's small. But in the case of Beyonce, I think it's not very likely that she will become a boy. So the chance is much less likely. So onto the form of the second conditional. The form is if plus past simple, then plus would or wouldn't, plus the main verb, so the verb which is telling us about the action, in the infinitive without to. So we can have a look there at the form. It's important to say that we can say would or wouldn't, depending on what we would do in that particular situation. And we can also change the modal verb to could or might, depending on how sure we are about what we would do. So for example, we could say, if I won the lottery, I could buy a Ferrari because it's possible. You're not saying that you definitely will buy it, but you would be able to because you would have the money. However, would shows that you are very sure. So now let's compare a few sentences looking at how possible something is in the second conditional. So we can go from quite impossible, where something can't happen, to quite possible. So let's look at these examples here. We have, if I went to the moon, I would try it and see if it tastes like cheese. So this one, I think, is quite impossible. I think we can all agree that, unless you manage to make friends with some kind of special space agency. Although, yes, quite impossible. Next example. If I saw a ghost, I would be scared. Now, this example, this is possible, depending on whether you believe in ghosts or not, but many people would say that this is possible, and I think probably most people would agree that if they saw a ghost, they would be scared. So the next example, this is a slightly different form of the second conditional, because this one is where we use it to give advice to someone. So this is where we're imagining what we would do if we were a certain person, if we were in their position. So here we have, if I were you, I would drive more carefully, okay? So in this case, we're saying, if I was in your shoes, if I was in your position, I would do that. Now, this is impossible. We can't become another person. So in this case, it's completely impossible. On to the last one. We've got, if she liked her job, she wouldn't want to change it. Now, this one is just saying, at the moment, she doesn't like her job, so she wants to change it. But this could change. There is a possibility that this could change. She could start to like her job and then she won't want to change it anymore. But in this case, it's saying if she liked her job, she wouldn't want to change it. So we could see from those examples that it varies the possibility level. It varies from completely impossible to quite possible. So now on to the third conditional. Now, don't be scared, because it's not as bad as you think it is. It's easy peasy, lemon squeezy. So the third conditional is often called the unreal conditional because it is actually something that will always be impossible. And this is because it's about the past. It's where we look at the past and we think about how we would have liked things to be different or how things could have been different. So we often use it to talk about regrets in the past, things that we wish would have gone differently. All right? So let's look at some examples of the third conditional in action. So here we go. If I had revised for the test, I would have passed it. This is a classic student complaint. If I had revised for the test, I would have passed it. That's one example, clearly a regret there. If we go on to the next one. If I had left earlier this morning, I wouldn't have missed the train. This is me. This is all the time me saying, if I'd set my alarm earlier, I wouldn't have missed the bus. So this is a classic example. Next one. This one is slightly different because here we're talking about if something had or hadn't happened, another thing wouldn't have been able to happen. So in this case, we're talking about what we call sequencing, like a domino effect, that this thing happened, so this thing could happen. So if we look at this one, if I hadn't gone to the party, I wouldn't have met my boyfriend. If I hadn't gone to that party, I wouldn't have met my boyfriend. Okay. So the form of the third conditional. The form starts with the if clause, if plus past perfect, then plus would, plus have, so would and have, or wouldn't, okay, plus a past participle. So been, seen, your verb in the past participle. So let's look at this example here. We've got if I had remembered to set my alarm, so had remembered being past perfect, then second part, the would part, I wouldn't have been late for work. I wouldn't have been late for work. So have always stays the same, doesn't change to has in the third person. So if we put she there, she wouldn't have been late for work. We wouldn't be changing have to has. It stays the same. So now let's test you. We've got some pictures here for you to have a look at and to try to make sentences using either the third or the second conditional. It's important to point out that for some of these, depending on what kind of sentence you want to make, you possibly could use the second or the third conditional, depending on if you think you're going to make a sentence about a future prediction, so something you think might happen, or if you think the picture might be in the past and thinking about what could have happened. Okay, so the first pictures, take a look at those. You can see we've got a man who's looking quite unwell. Looks like he's got a bad headache. He needs some medicine to make him feel better. Have a think about what you think could have happened to him. In the second one there, we've got a woman who looks like she's dreaming about a holiday, nice holiday somewhere. So have a think about those pictures, make notes about your sentences, try and form a sentence in the second or the third conditional. Okay, so moving on to the next slide of pictures. In this slide, we can see a short dog, a sausage dog, and he's wearing stilts to make himself taller. So have a think about that one. What sentence could we make there? And then we have an unhappy student who looks like they've got an F in their history test. So have a think about what sentence you could make there. So let's talk about the possible answers to those pictures. So in the first one, I think this guy looked as if he'd had too many whiskies the night before. So perhaps his sentence could be, if I hadn't drunk so much last night, I wouldn't have felt so hungover. Okay, I wouldn't have felt so hungover. Next one. This lady looked like she was dreaming of a perfect holiday. So we could make a second conditional sentence here. And we could say, if I won the lottery, I would go on so many lovely holidays, or I would go on a fantastic holiday. All right. Next one, the dog. I think he's wishing he was taller. Now in this case, it's past simple. We're using second conditional. He wishes he was taller. He's imagining an impossible situation. He can't be taller, but he wishes he was. All right. Last one, this would be third conditional. This has already happened, so it's a regret about the past. If I'd studied harder, I wouldn't have failed my test. If I'd studied harder, I wouldn't have failed my test. Okay, So that was the second and the third conditional. It's quite a heavy grammar lesson, so I hope you followed along well there. Please feel free to review the lesson and go over that again. And yes, I hope that was helpful. Thank you very much for watching. Good luck with that, and remember to love English. And if you like this channel, please subscribe. Subscribe to Love English. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.